5:30 p.m. Monday, March 8th, 2021. I'm calling this meeting of the Paris City Council to order. We'll start off with the invocation led by Mr. Gene Anderson, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Ms. Portugal, and everyone please stand.
Pray. Heavenly Father, we're indeed thankful for your many blessings upon our city. We just pray, Father, that you would guide and direct our council tonight as they conduct the business of the city. Help them to have wisdom and understanding. And Father, we pray for our city, for our state, for our nation, Father, as we go through difficult times, that you would help us and guide us and direct us. And we just thank you for your many blessings. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone may be seated. It brings us to the Citizens Forum. Persons desiring to address the council must limit their presentation to no more than 2 minutes. Unless an item is posted on the agenda, the Texas Open Meetings Act prohibits the council from responding to any comments other than to refer the matter to a future agenda, to an existing policy, or to a staff person with specific factual information. Claims against the city, council members, or employees, as well as individual personal appeals, are not appropriate for Citizens Forum. The Citizens Forum is now open. Anyone wishing to address the council, please step up, give us your name and address. You'll have at least 2 minutes.
Good evening, council members. My name is Don Yarbrough. I reside at 234 24th Street Northwest, and I am the founder of Wheeled Workers of Lamar County. If you may have heard in the Paris News or otherwise. We come here today to ask your help with a certain issue. Is that one of the things that we do in Wheeled Workers is we clean up city streets. We collect the litter and at Trail to Paris, Reno Rail Trail, Lake Crook, Pat Mays, and we want to do so on the inner city streets in Paris as well. Before, several weeks ago, we did take the avenue of speaking with the Paris Public Works Sanitation Department. We already have an agreement with Bill the Ranger that when we pick up on the Trail to Paris, well, not the Reno Rail Trail, but just the Trail to Paris and Lake Crook, that once we finish and we collect all the bags and we stage those bags in a certain area by a trash can by the Trail to Paris, that Bill the Ranger, I just send him a text and he'll send his guys to go and pick it up. I was seeking the same arrangement with the sanitation department, namely Mr. Edwayne Samus. And I spoke with him in his office a couple of weeks ago and told him what we did and what we do and what the request was, that we would like to see if we can get the same arrangement with him as we do with Mr. Bill the Ranger. He advised me that he would bring it up in the next meeting. That he had, and that was several weeks ago. And then I called him back a few days ago, and his response was that he couldn't help us. So we're here today to seek any other way that we can get this done, that we can collect on city streets, stage the bags in a certain location because they're in the right of way. Mainly ditches, roadsides, or something like that, and have the city come and pick those up. And we're here to request that maybe be put on agenda or.
Well, we understand that you guys can't really respond in regards to that. We're just looking for some type of avenue.
And I can refer you to the city manager. I think everybody would be pretty receptive to helping you guys out. It sounds like a really good service you're doing. So just talk to the city manager, Mr. Path, and see what you can work out with him. I have a feeling he'll work something out with you. And if it requires council action, I think you'd have a very willing council.
Yeah, we have talked to Grayson Path, but we'll talk with him in more regard to the issue with Samus and trying to figure that out. But he is the one that referred us to Samus and asked us to speak with him. So After that, that's why we're having this issue. But we'd love to keep doing it. We just want a little help to be able to just pick it up. That's it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to address council? Seeing none, I will close the citizens forum. Next is consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that any council member wishes to have pulled for additional discussion?
I just had one question on item number 9. We had some issues, I think, with a couple of homeowners there with maybe some backyard issues and fence issues back whenever they were doing the construction. We got all that cleared up, I guess. Just wanted to touch base on that.
Yes. On the backyard issues and everything that we're having, that was on the Johnson Woods Channel project.
Okay.
This was the Gary Nash project. It was two completely separate
Okay,
projects.
perfect.
What they were doing, they were saying that seeing the rock and everything come in, they were like, hey, you know, I wanted that too, but it was two separate projects.
Sounds good.
Any other questions or comments about the consent agenda?
I'd like to make the motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve,
Second.
2 seconds. All in favor? Okay, consent agenda passes unanimously. Next is item number 10 of the regular agenda. Receive presentation from the Police Department Racial Profiling Annual Report.
Good evening, Council. Each year, the Police Department is required by statute to collect data on traffic stops that our officers make. We're also required to have a comparative analysis done on that data for several years. And again, this year, we've retained Dr. Fritz and his organization to do that analysis and prepare this report that y'all received tonight. So I'm going to ask Dr. Fritz to come up and go over the report.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. What I'll present tonight is the 2021 Racial Profiling Report, and it is based on all traffic stops that were conducted from January 1 of 2020 through December 31 of 2020. And as was mentioned, it's required under state law, and I'll kind of walk through what the analysis is that we do and kind of what the numbers and the comparative analysis says regarding the actions of the Paris Police Department. So the first thing that we do is we look at your policy, your agency policy, because the Texas law is very prescriptive in what has to be in a policy. And so we make sure that you have all of those standards in your policy. One is to prohibit racial profiling. Another one is that you have standards regarding training and education, complaint process, public education about a complaint process. But most of this is about the data and the data collection, and you collect all the data that's required. So from our standpoint, the Paris Police Department is fully in compliance with the law regarding what is necessary on the racial profiling law that we've had in this state since 2001. So what the state moved to a few years ago is mandating a comparative analysis, and so that's how we structure the report, but it's also how I structure the presentation. So I'll kind of walk through the three of them are comparative analyses, and then the fourth analysis that we do. So the first one, it looks at your traffic stops, and it compares your traffic stops by race, ethnicity, and that's what's presented on this PowerPoint slide. Is you had 3,167 traffic stops in 2020, and of those, 2,040 were white motorists, 893 were black motorists, etc. Along with that comparative analysis is specified by statute, the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, TCOL, which is the governing body that not only licenses peace officers but also is responsible for the reporting format for racial profiling, mandates that we compare the breakdown of stops by race, ethnicity to the population, and so that's what's presented in this chart. It is your 2019 American Community Survey, U.S. Census Bureau estimates of the population by race, ethnicity. It's the city population, and then it's the county population in comparison to the percentage of the stops. So, for example, in the chart, I cannot see that. 64.41% of your stops were white motorists, 28% were black motorists, and about 7% were of Hispanic motorists. and then it compares that to your city population. What you see is almost equal with the city population on white motorists. White motorists are a little bit underrepresented on the county population. Black motorists are stopped higher than their percentage in the city and county population, and Hispanic motorists are stopped lower than their percentage in the city and county population. And again, that analysis was required by TCOL. There are some significant issues with that analysis that's required. One of the major issues is that we don't have a valid measure of the driving population, and so it's an issue of a benchmark. We're trying to compare the traffic stops, which we know it occurred. We know the race, ethnicity of the person that was stopped, but then who do we compare that to? And the population is the proxy measure that is most commonly used. But it is not a valid measure of the driving population. Those are two different measures, and we don't have a valid measure of the driving population. And so that's part of the issue with mandating a comparison to a population is that people see disparities and have a tendency to believe that disparities mean something that they in fact do not. And so that's one of the problems. The other problem that we have with assessing stop data is that most of the time officers do not know the race, ethnicity of the person they're stopping prior to the traffic stop. And so that's been something that's been collected by each law enforcement agency on each traffic stop since 2009. They document whether or not they knew the race, ethnicity of the person prior to the stop. And in 2019, you had 7.23% of the time, so basically 7% of the time, the Paris police officer who was conducting the traffic stop knew the race, ethnicity of the person prior to the stop. That's actually higher than the state average. We've been doing this for a long time. We've been doing this since 2005. So in 2016, we took all of the TCOL reports, 1,186 agencies reported that year, about 3.25 million stops, and 2.7% of the time the officer knew the race, ethnicity of the stop. So that's kind of the benchmark. And then I looked at 2019 and 2020. So 2019, it was 2.9%, and in 2020 it was 3.7% of the time the officer knew the race, ethnicity of the person prior to stop. Why is that important? Because racial profiling, by definition, is an officer taking a law enforcement-related action based upon a person's race. Stopping a vehicle is a law enforcement-related action. If we don't know the race of the person prior to the stop, then there cannot be racial profiling. Yes, sir.
What did you say the percentage was in Paris?
It's 7.23%.
So is that alarming to you?
No, that's actually higher than than the state average. The state average is 2.9%.
That they knew
Mhm.
they were stopping.
Right.
So shouldn't that be alarming?
No. I mean, that's higher than what it is in the state. I mean, alarming in what sense? That it should be
That they knew what race they were stopping.
in such a little amount of the time? Is that what you're saying? That 92% of the time, basically, they did not. We can just round it. 92%
Well, but
of
it's
the time.
97% of the time nationwide, or the benchmark.
Statewide, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
shouldn't that be alarming?
Well, I don't think it's alarming, because the question that it's asking is that did the officer know the race, ethnicity prior to the stop?
Exactly.
And there's several reasons why they would not know the race, ethnicity prior to the stop. And so part of it is daylight. So some people would make the argument that, when it's daytime, it's possible. When it's nighttime, it's much harder. But it's other things such as sight lines. So how is the officer approaching the vehicle? The officer's approaching the vehicle from behind. It's very difficult to know the race, ethnicity of the person prior to the stop. It can be equipment on the vehicle, so especially tinted windows make it very difficult to see inside of the window, and inside then to determine the person's race, ethnicity. And then it can also be distance. So if they're using radar, they could be 200 yards away from the vehicle prior to making the determination, making a stop.
I'm not talking about the times that they didn't know. I'm talking about the times that they did know. it's in a higher percentage here that they did know, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're
So
saying.
they did know 7% of the time.
Yes, which is a
Yes.
higher percentage than
Yes.
the benchmark.
Yes.
So that's alarming.
Well, I think that what I have
It's more than double the state benchmark.
right, but what I typically hear is that we want officers to know the race ethnicity. So I usually hear the direct opposite argument from
So you're looking at it from a
councils.
different perspective. Yeah.
Is that we want officers to know the race ethnicity prior to the stop, but they don't know the race ethnicity prior to the stop. So I mean, we do about 35 reports for agencies, and I never see that number above 10%. So I mean, there are agencies that are more than, just like yours, that are more than 2.9%, but
So
usually
why?
it's 10% or less of the time that they know the race ethnicity.
So why would you want them to know the race or ethnicity before you stop them?
Well, because if you're making a racial profiling assessment, you would want them to know the race ethnicity prior to the stop. From my standpoint, the stop data doesn't mean as much. Where we've moved from a research standpoint on racial profiling is we've started to pay less attention to the stop data, with the understanding that the officer doesn't know the race ethnicity of the person prior to the stop. If you listen to the media, that's most of where the analysis is done, is at the stop level. And so what we've moved to and what the state's moved to is what we call post-stop outcomes. So it's when the officer has approached the vehicle, now the officer's identified them, the officer knows the race ethnicity. Some people would argue that in order to do an effective analysis, we would also want that same information from the stop as well. And I mean, I've been challenged many times of why is that number so low. I've actually never been challenged of why that number is so high.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
When you stop them, what happens after you stop them, that's part of the profiling. But in my understanding, racial profiling exists now because you were stopping a certain race more than others. That's one perspective you can look at, and that's why that number was alarming to me. You know who you know the race before you even stop them. But if the data shows that you're not stopping one race more than the other, then you're good. But I'm just saying, it's alarming that
7%
the
of the
race.
time.
Yeah, that's.
No, I understand what you're saying, sir. This variable, this data point is not broken down by race ethnicity. And the new data reporting standards that will come into effect for next year, it's still not broken down by race ethnicity. So we don't have any knowledge of, is there a particular race ethnicity in which they do know the race prior to the stop. It's just a general number of the 3,167 traffic stops. The officer knew 7% of the time.
Understand.
Is it possible that in a small town with most stops would be lower speed stops because you're dealing with much faster speeds in larger towns? Somebody zaps by you and you would not know the race. But in a smaller town, it would seem maybe logical that you might know the race of the person simply because most of the streets in Paris are 30 miles per hour, and the police officer would have a better opportunity to see the person than they would in a 50-mile-an-hour zone, say in a larger city. Or I'm throwing that out there, Gary, as a possibility.
It could be, yes.
Do y'all do the analysis based on city size?
I mean, we do cities of varying sizes all the way to, I think the largest one is El Paso.
Broke down like Paris compared to Mount Pleasant or Texarkana or something like that, comparable cities.
I mean, on this particular variable, we see a great deal of consistency. Usually it's between 1% and 10%. And again, if you take all 1,200 agencies, it's 1,186. We take all 1,200 agencies, it's 3%.
Okay.
So it's within I would say within probably a reasonable standard deviation from what the state average is, state percentage is. Yeah. But that poses a problem for making any kind of assessment about that bar chart that's now required as part of the TCOL standards, is because if we don't know the race ethnicity prior to the stop, then we can't make, there cannot be any racial profiling because they didn't know the race ethnicity. So that's the first comparative analysis that is done. The second comparative analysis that is done is basically the outcome of the stop. So this is after the officer has approached the vehicle, and then these are the four major traffic stop outcomes. So did the person get a verbal warning, a written warning, citation, or arrest? And the way that this is written and the way it should be read is that of the white motorists that were stopped, 13% received a verbal warning. Of the black motorists that were stopped, 14% received a verbal warning, on and on through the written warnings, through citations, and through arrests. I think a big takeaway from this in general, without focusing on race ethnicity, is that about 75% of the time, the decision of the officers to issue a warning. And so it is about 25% of the time in which a person receives a citation or is arrested. And what we look for and where we've gone with the research is looking at the post-stop outcomes. So now we know that the officer knows the race ethnicity of the person prior to the stop. Is that we look for consistency in the aggregate. This is aggregate data. It's not based upon individual officers aggregated together, but we look for consistency across the variables. There's some inconsistency on citation and arrests regarding Hispanic motorists. My estimate is, my guess is that it's because there were not a lot of Hispanic stops. And so overall there were about 200 Hispanic stops. Hispanic motorists were stopped, about 900 black motorists were stopped, and about 2,000 white motorists were stopped. And as you start getting smaller numbers, you start getting greater fluctuation in percentages based upon what could be small changes. And I think that's why you see that on the citations, and then the smaller percentage on the arrests. The third analysis, comparative analysis that is required to be done is then to look at the searches. So another post-stop outcome was a search conducted, and about 10% of the time, 9.4% of the time you conducted a search pursuant to the traffic stop. Most of the time that was either a consent search or a probable cause search. And same as presented in the prior slide, of the white motorists that were stopped, 8.9% were searched. Of the black motorists that were stopped, 11.2% were searched. And of the Hispanic motorists that were stopped, 7.4% were searched. We pay particular attention to consent searches because those are what are determined to be discretionary searches. In other words, it's based upon the officer's decision to ask permission to search the person or search the vehicle. That occurred 134 times, which is not a large number, but it is about 4.2% of your traffic stops resulted in a consent search. But when we look at searches, what we're also interested in is, was contraband discovered? It's what's typically referred to as the hit rate. So the police have taken an additional action besides just stopping the vehicle and giving them, in this city, typically a warning. Now they've gone and conducted some type of search of the vehicle. And so they've taken a further action. The question then becomes, are those actions successful? And do they find contraband? And you find contraband about 54% of the time. The initial national average was 15%. That came out of the Open Policing Project out of Stanford University. The highest that's been seen is on a national scale is 30%. So basically your searches are fruitful. So the officers are being strategic in their searches and are most of the time finding contraband when they do conduct those searches. And most of the time it is drugs that they find.
I have a question. What constitutes, because I'm looking at the percentages, what constitutes the searches? Is it something that that they see within the motorists, or what's one of the main reasons why they would ask for a search?
There's actually different categories of search, but you're almost always your searches in Paris are either consent searches, so the officer asks the motorist for permission, or they're based upon probable cause, which means that the officer had articulable facts to then search the vehicle. The most common example of that is approaching a vehicle and smelling marijuana coming from the vehicle. Then they have probable cause to search. Those are the two primary ones. There's also search incident to arrest, towing a vehicle. There's some other ones, but from how Paris PD officers search vehicles, it's usually based upon probable cause or it's based upon consent. The last,
That was actually Ms. Stone asked
Yeah,
that question
I
with,
answered
with the mask
I'm
on.
the
It's hard to
I'm
tell.
sorry.
yeah, that was me. Yeah.
Really?
Surround sound.
Is this being, I'm gonna have to watch this on videotape. That was, okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, did I answer your question, Jen?
You did answer it for all of us, thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay, the last analysis is really not a comparative analysis, even though it stated that in the law, and that's looking at complaints. So did anyone file a complaint alleging racial profiling? You had one complaint last year, and after an internal investigation, the complaint was not sustained. And so that's the last analysis that's required by law, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and we'll try to figure out who asked it.
Through your report and your statistics that you came up with and your data, did you see anything alarming that we should be worried about as a council or if our police chief's here tonight?
No, sir. No, sir. I would say that the Paris Police Department aligns with pretty much every other agency that we look at. And so from my standpoint as analyst that looks at 35 different agencies, nothing struck me as something that you should be concerned about.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know you made a comment about they want the officers to know the race or identity before they stop them, but isn't there a proper standard safety protocol for officers anyway, despite what the race is once they find out who it is? Isn't there a protocol like a standard PPE?
Yes.
Personal protection equipment. Isn't there a standard safety procedure that our police officers take when approaching a vehicle, no matter what the race is?
Yes. I'm sure they do. I don't know specifically for Paris PD,
I
but
don't
it's
care what color
but-
you were.
yeah,
My
it's-
safety means a lot.
It's very standard for an agency. I'm most familiar with DPS and their 5-step violator contact. So they have very specific steps that the officer, the trooper, must follow when making contact with the motorist. And then they review those videos, and if they aren't following that policy, then they can be in violation. And I'm sure that through training, the Paris PD, I just haven't asked, so I don't want to say something that I don't know for sure, but I'm sure the Paris PD has the same kind of violator contact steps that need to be done for both the safety of the officer and the safety of the motorist. I knew it was you that asked that time. See, tracked well that time.
Anything else? Any council members have any questions? All right, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for your time. Enjoy your evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is item number 11, discuss and possibly confirm the city manager's appointment of Andrew Mack as the Director of Planning and Community Development. Mr. Path.
Yes, the Director of Planning and Community Development position became vacant this last October 2020. And with this, the City Council authorized me to split the position up. It was combined city engineer / DPCD position, and we split it up to try to refocus the position. So I've been trying to pursue both positions separately. And so I've been working with Stephanie Harris, City Attorney, as Michael Smith, Public Works Director, and Sandy Collier, HR and Civil Service Director, as my interview team. I am pleased to present, we interviewed 5 individuals for this position here. And I'm pleased to present to you Andrew Mack as my selection. You're going to remove your mask now so you can see your face now. And he is currently the planning director for Park Rapids, Minnesota. He has 36 years of community planning experience, including zoning, planning, code enforcement, building inspection, building codes, fire codes, and more. He actually worked in Sulphur Springs for a time, but before going up to Minnesota. He's had a lot of experience working with legislation, analyzing legislation coming out, advising other state planners of oncoming legislation, which is very impressive to have. And so I'm very impressed with this individual, and I'd like to recommend him for your approval tonight. So, and he's here to answer questions or what you'd have. So, would you like to just introduce yourself real quick?
Thank you, Grayson. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my second trip down to Texas here in March. I'm pleased to report the fact that my second trip's been much more pleasant than my first trip in your winter storm. That's true, but my folks in Minnesota were glad I brought the warm weather back up with them the day I left. Anyways, it's a pleasure to be here. As Grayson mentioned, my master's degree is from the University of Texas in Arlington. Started my career out in Sulphur Springs back in the mid-'80s, and it's a pleasure to be back down here in Texas again. I definitely developed an endearing appreciation for the folks down here. We started our family out in Texas and moved back to Minnesota, where both my wife and I were born and raised. But I'm looking forward to the opportunity to serve you here in Paris, Texas. I had a lot of fond memories. In 4 years, we probably made at least a dozen or more trips up here to the Paris Fish Fry. I'm pleased to see that they're still in operation. But looking forward to becoming your planning director, looking forward to working with your staff, looking forward to further implementing the council's policies with regard to those priorities that have been identified and discussed with your city manager. Aside from that, I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
Any questions?
Just to Grayson, glad to see, glad that you're here. What does this add, by separating both jobs, what does it add to the budget, just from my notes?
Oh, I have to go back to, I did break that out in that prior memo. I'd have to go back and look at that again.
Okay.
I split it up there. There was actually more of a wash, and at least this first year, like the first few years was a wash, given what the last employee was making at the time before departure, and so, but in a couple years, it'll be added to the budget there, but I couldn't recall off the top of my head. I apologize.
Not a big...
No, it was not significant, no, particularly for the added value of having the work product getting for two employees and slipping out, because I know I've been serving as interim this position here. It is definitely a full-time job, and so I've been doing my city manager job on the weekends and nights, and so having two people will be advantageous to our citizens. So,
When would you start, sir?
My planned start date is the end of this month, 29th of March. It may be a day or two within there, but just right at the end of the month here.
Any other questions? Well, I'll make this motion to confirm the city manager's appointment of Andrew Mack as Director of Planning and Community Development.
Second.
All in favor? And unanimous. Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate you all. Look forward to being back here soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Andrew.
Item number 12, discuss it and possibly act on how to expend the City of Paris's allocation of coronavirus relief funding from the Texas Department of Emergency Management. Mr. Pat.
I keep bringing some back to you. I'm sorry, but we had a snowstorm, and so the mayor and I talked about this. But this last December, I brought to you a possible recommendation on using the CRF or COVID-19 funds, CARES Act funding, to go towards emergency equipment to help us prepare for the next disaster, whether it be a virus or a snowstorm or hail or tornado or so forth. We had discussed trying to reimburse ourselves for COVID-19 expenditures, and so I did go to work gathering those expenses. I brought them to you at the last time we discussed this. And at the time, we decided to go ahead and hold off until the summer to revisit it again, so we had more COVID-19 expenditures accrued. But then we had a snowstorm, a pretty bad one, a lot of power outages across the state, including in Paris. We had a near scare with our water pumping facility there. We realized that we are deficient when it comes to generator capacity and other equipment there. So the mayor and I discussed this, that we thought it'd be good to come back to you and see if you would like to maybe go back to my original recommendation of perhaps using it's about 1.2 or so million in funds to go towards equipment instead of reimbursing ourselves. Again, we did cover ourselves ourselves through the budget last year, through reimbursement through the budget. We can still do that, but again, we want to revisit this in case you'd like to either continue what we plan for the summer, or we can get started looking at other equipment to utilize this funding for. So I'll take any questions or thoughts or discussion on that.
Well, I spoke with Mr. Path about this regarding the pump that the power was turned off in, and we looked into, did we have a generator? No, we didn't have a generator that was powerful enough to drive that pump, and even if we'd had it, we didn't have the electrical hookup that would have allowed us to use it. So at the time, this happened, said, this sounds like a really good thing to spend that money on, because it not only could the generator be used there are other essential things, lift stations, things like that if they went down for an extended period, could be a problem. So that's why I suggested we look into this again. So I still don't think we have to do it immediately, Mr. Path. I think, but the inclination was to go ahead and identify the most likely things that could help us out in a similar type emergency, and.
It would definitely help us to know how much money I have to work with, and so it would be my recommendation that we utilize the entire net amount. Of course, we have some commitments to our Paris ISD, Chisholm ISD, the Lamar County Health District, and so forth. But I recommend that we use the entire net difference of that to go towards things like the generators and so forth, and other equipment. We have other needs in other departments, and that would be my recommendation for that. Otherwise, if we do try to reimburse ourselves, take a significant amount of that funding away for that. But we can still do that, but again, want to revisit given our snowstorm.
All right. Any questions or comments, anything?
I would like to see extra generators. I know some of our churches had warming stations at, in their parish halls, fellowship halls. But if those churches had lost electricity, those would not have been available. So I think it would be good to have some extra generators that we could provide places that were offering a warm place for our citizens without electricity.
Certainly. We can look at that as part of the whole package as well. So.
Thank you.
And part of this, too, is why I recommend if we do proceed, I should probably draft some parameters for this. I think it'd be appropriate that the city council approve those requests. This is obviously money given to the city by the state, and obviously the council could delegate to me to approve, but we're talking $1.1 or so million here. So I thought it might be appropriate that expenditure of that much money may require some discussion, since it wasn't in our budget. So, but I could develop some parameters and protocols like I did for the nonprofit type deal. This is another protocol that we can go through. So,
I personally would like for you to prioritize the things that you think are most important and present us your recommendations.
Yes,
for
yep.
approval.
But we can do that. Yes, I'd work with staff to do that and analyze lists. And I can see the protocol being where I gather everything. We start developing what's the biggest need, and then I present those to you and for approval before we go buy it. So. But again, it helped to know how much money I have to work with.
Okay. So what does the council need to do on this, Mr. Path? Or
if you're okay with me utilizing the net, minus our commitments for these the resource management consulting, the schools and the Paris Lamar Health District, and not reimburse ourselves, that would give me a good idea how much money I have to work with. It would give us the most money to work with as well for things.
How much is that?
That would be about 1.1 something million. It's some change there. I didn't do the math here. It's about 1.15 or so million or so. We have $1,393,000 given to us, and we've got commitments for about $232,000. So the difference of that is about 1.1 some.
And I'm thinking, just water pump wise, you're going to probably do you have any kind of load or usage on that?
We're gathering that right now. It's a size. We have a large generator parked at one of our lift stations. It's a beast, and that thing was nowhere near the size we needed. So we got a lot of work to do to figure out what we need for that facility, and also. There's other critical access facilities we have as well. I mean, that was the one critical link that suffered that day. I may have other critical links.
The big three-phase electricity generator, the really large ones that I'm thinking you're probably going to need. I mean, you're talking $250,000 just for one.
Yes. Yeah. Those
generator big enough to run.
Those high RPM generators.
Methodist Church down here, just a part of their building is going to be a substantial
Yeah, that one generator alone is going to be, yeah, you're right, $200,000, $300,000 easily. And,
And then you'll need some support equipment, probably a fuel trailer,
yeah,
maybe some light support equipment to go with it.
yeah, we got a lot of work to figure out what all we
Junction
need with that.
boxes or connectors or whatever they have to have.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Okay, I'm good with it. Do we need a motion on this, or?
No, I can develop some protocols, procedures, to bring back to you. And, because again, I do think it's appropriate that the city council see those before I start spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so,
What about too, we were talking about motor graders and stuff just to be able to get some of the city streets. And I think there's a certain bar you can put on the bottom of those, he may know, that we could install in an emergency situation just to clear
Yeah.
some local city streets and
yeah,
stuff.
we can look at
are
those as
pretty
well.
cheap.
Yeah, we can. So I like to look at all kinds of ideas, not just necessarily generators, but also things that we can help. My original proposal was to buy things that can help us combat disasters,
Yeah.
whether it be a snowstorm or it be a ice storm or be a tornado with debris
It'd
on
be
the
kind of
ground. Or,
pointless for us to buy a bunch of $100,000 snow trucks because we're going to
Yeah.
use them once every.
we need about 50 of those once every 10 or 20 years,
Yeah,
of course.
that's pointless.
So hopefully, but very good. Well, I'll work on some protocols, procedures, and come back to you at a future council meeting.
All right,
So,
thank you,
thank you.
Mr. Path. Item number 13, discuss and act on a hangar wait list application and hangar waiting list policy for Coxfield Airport. Ms. Ellis.
Okay. For the last several months, city staff has received complaints about the manner in which hangar assignments were being made at the airport. So we met with our airport manager, Grayson, and I believe Ms. Portugal was involved. So we came up with a hangar wait application and a hangar wait policy. That application, what we're going to do is it's going to be kept at City Hall. We'll send a copy down to the airport manager, but we're going to go in order that the people are on the applications instead of having people switch around and in this hangar and out of that hangar. That was approved by the airport board on February the 25th, so we're asking that you approve the same policy and application.
How many people are on the waiting list right now?
There are close to 20 people.
And how many vacancies come up typically per year?
Hardly any at all. I will tell you one of the, which I think was very important, one of the that's in the application or in the policy says if staff calls you and you pass on that hangar, we're noting it. If we call you a second time and you pass, you have to go to the bottom of the list. You don't just get to sit there on the list because it's not the hangar that you desire. We've already had somebody move up that had been on the list for quite some time.
I've said this before and I'll say it again. Anytime you got probably a 20-year waiting list to get a hangar, your prices are too low. This is basic supply and demand. The prices need to be increased for these hangars until we don't have a waiting list anymore. And the airport board never wants to hear about that because they all fly planes, so they don't want that. But this is basic supply and demand, and if we have a scarce commodity and people are wanting it desperately, then we need to let the price go where it goes, is in my opinion. And the people that want it, that's just, you pay the price for it. But right now, it's a scarce commodity. And that's why you had people subleasing, because it's such a deal for them, which I understand. We've stopped the subleasing.
Yes.
I won't be on the council when this comes up again, but I still think we need to consider raising the rates till we don't have a waiting list anymore.
What is the hangars, we built some this year, what did they cost per hangar, I guess?
I don't.
400,000 was from TxDOT Aviation, and I believe we matched 40,000 maybe.
I think that's right.
And it was 2 or 3 years ago, and at the time, we could have built 6 more for not a lot of money, and I was airport chairman, and when I came, so it was 4 or 5 years ago, I came to the council and they would not consider building. We have run out of room to even build anymore, even private hangars, until we extend the taxiway. So we turn people away all the time that don't even wait to get on the waiting list. They move somewhere else.
I have a couple questions.
Chief?
You made the comment
Ms. Ellis, that we have an airport manager? We have an airport manager out there?
Yes, we contract with a person that does the airport management.
Okay. The other thing that I had a question about was, it's my understanding that out at the airport, if somebody sells their plane, then whoever buys the plane thinks they inherit the use of the hangar. That's my understanding. That may or may not be true, but that's what I understand. And I think that this agreement here might need to be a little clearer when they say that the plane doesn't dictate who owns the hangar. The city dictates who they choose to lease the hangar to. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, you are. And we did have a recent situation where a tenant sold an airplane to someone else, and he assumed that the hangar went with the plane. He assumed that because that's how business had been done in the past. Our city attorney wrote letters to both of them, and she is working through that right now. We had another situation where last week a pilot called and said, hey, I can't remember the hangar name, but did he buy a new plane? Because he gave up his hangar 2 months ago, but according to the lease agreement, he has 6 months to replace it. And I said, if he did, we do not know anything about it. So I sent an email to the airport manager. I guess I'm getting off track, but it's all while we're having the hangar waiting list. Anyway, she's addressing that too. A letter will be going out tomorrow as well.
I think your hangar waiting list policy
Yes, ma'am.
needs to be very clear with a statement in there that the city enters into an agreement for who leases the hangars, not the person who sold the plane, and the hangar doesn't go with the plane you buy.
We can add that on there if you all want to approve it with that,
I would
a notation.
suggest that it needs to be a little clearer.
Okay.
You say it, but you're very polite. It needs to just be blunt and
Okay.
out there, because apparently some of the owners may or may not respond to something that's as subtle as that.
And that's also covered in their lease, which some people
It
may
is
not
covered.
read, they just sign.
It is covered in their lease.
If they're on the waiting list, and let's say the next person is picked and they don't own an airplane.
That was also discussed. And they were basically several different opinions. Some thought if you did not have an airplane and you're on the list, if you don't have an airplane, you shouldn't be on that list. Others thought differently. Others said, okay, well, we'll leave them on there, but you have 4 months. But they ended up doing 6 months. But that's your discretion to change it. You know, if you want to say if you don't have a plane, you do not get to be on the waiting list.
So what does the lease say? If you have a hangar, do you have to have a plane?
No, the lease doesn't. The lease does not. In fact, what the lease says, if you're in a hangar and you decide you're going to sell your plane, you have 6 months to buy another plane. So you can still rent it. You have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
You're not, according to the lease agreement that you sign, you're not to have someone else's plane in your hangar.
Okay.
So who follows up with, say if I have a plane and I sold it, my hangar is empty, and 6 months is up and I still don't have a plane in that hangar, but I'm still paying, who follows up with that?
Well, I'm going to for now. I don't know that it has been in the past. When I learned that someone else had moved out, I contacted them and they said, yes, I said, you have 6 months and it's on the calendar. I notified the airport manager. I notified the city manager and city attorney, so that there's several people that know what's going on.
Shouldn't the airport manager manage that?
I agree.
Yeah, there's, as I've stepped into the role as being the interim this as well, and airport manager in a role. So we've been making some changes, and I've asked Janice to help me with this because it was more than I could take on this and all the other roles here. So this policy is a direct product of that. We're trying to clean some operations up out there. We're trying to work with what we have and trying to systematically make some good make some changes here. So we are following up on we're developing some timelines, procedures to be watching. Okay, your plane's no longer there. We're going to be following up in 6 months. We have staff. We have a staff person working with Janice here to help us with that tracking, and we're going to start systematically changing, updating the policies to get us more operational efficient out there.
Me and Ms. Portugal spoke about this the other day, and I had a pilot friend of mine that has an airplane out there and has one of the hangars, and there's some really good people out there that have airplanes in their hangars and they pay their rent every month. Mm-hmm. And there's a handful, it sounds like, that have used them as storage buildings and businesses and whatnot, and that's not what the intended use was. The intended use is park your airplane in it where it doesn't get rained and hailed on, and use it when you need to. We've got some business people, though, in town that need a hangar whenever they have a business person come in with their airplane for storage, or some of those and I'm glad that we're finally going to clean some of this up, and there's still some out there. I think there was somebody living in one. There was somebody that had a camper in one. There was somebody that had a bunch of cars tore apart in one. That's not the intended use for that thing. And obviously at $150 a month and a couple $100,000 at least cost of building, that doesn't cover the cost of it. So it is something that we're doing as a thing of as added service to our community. And I'm all about it. And I want all the pilots to get along and all that. But, I don't want to go out there and say, if you sell your airplane, I would like to give them a little bit of time, because I know 2 prominent business people in town that are leasing space out there now. One is building a hangar, paying for it, and he has since traded airplanes, and his airplane is gone right now, and he's bought. But I don't want to run those kind of people off. No. I know that's hard to decipher. I don't know how we decipher that. But.
And that's why in the lease here, we give them 6 months and stuff, because we know sometimes you trade planes out. So that's what the 6 month period is to kind of help with that.
Just a little run of the mill Cessna 152 is a $200,000 investment.
Yeah, it's not easy.
And I wouldn't want it parked outside for 2 years waiting on a hangar, and I understand that.
Exactly. That's why I think that's when the waiting list came up. The discussion on that item came up is should they have a plane to be on the list? And they thought no, because they may not want to spend $200,000 and have it sit on the ramp for 20 years until they finally get a hangar there. Yep.
Well, that's why there's 2 things. We need to really look at the job description of the airport manager. We need to start managing it. And then there's opportunity, like the mayor said. I mean, if somebody doesn't, he just brought up a lot of examples of how people are using those hangars. So what's to stop me from getting on the list, getting me a hangar, and then go to I know who's at the bottom of the list, and say, hey, I'll give you this hangar, but you got to pay me double the price. Yeah. There's an opportunity for that type of stuff. And I know we like a lot of good people, but how many people are really good? So, so we have opportunity to cheat, and I want you to remember, you said an added service to the community. That's what it's supposed to be for. That's why you spend the money.
Yep.
But people take advantage of it. So, but added service to the community. I want y'all to remember that.
No, absolutely, and that's. I think we're getting a little off the policy here, but
it's pretty easy to look. If you walk in a hangar and you look at an airplane and you look at the tail number, I can tell you who owns it in about.
Yep. Those are all things we're implementing right now. That's one thing of my experience with waiting lists and policies is looking at tail numbers, and so that tells who owns the plane. But yes, and also the lease does explicitly say you cannot sublease this out. So, but we're stepping it up, and we're going to be doing more inspections for hangars and working on that. But we're looking to make some changes out there. So,
okay.
Oh,
but this is one of the first ones.
Done an excellent job, Mr. Path as well. I would kind of like the rest of the council's opinion on giving them 6 months, because you've taken flying lessons on a certain plane. It's like a woman looking through a shoe catalog, you dream on, I want those. So I find it hard to believe that it would take most people 6 months to purchase an airplane. If you've gone to the trouble and expense, I think 4 months would be plenty, but that's just my thinking. I want to hear what the rest of you think.
Wait, when Mr. Pilgrim said that he got a couple of prominent businessmen in the community. I don't really care if you're prominent or not. I just want everybody to be treated fair. I don't care if you got a 7-figure salary or a 2-figure salary. Everybody needs to be treated fair, and we need to get a protocol, set rules and policies in place, no matter who you are in the community or what you have, your status in the community. It just needs to be a fair playing field, and that's all I want.
Yep, that's what we're working towards. Yep, absolutely. But yeah, I think to Ms. Portugal's question there for the council is on the waiting list, if you rise to the top of the list and you don't have a plane, our policy says you can have 6 months, which again, they mirror that off of our lease agreement. The 6 months there, 6 months here, be consistent there, but it could be 3, it could be 2, it could be 4. Just how long do you have to get a plane before you can then, you can get the hangar, but you have how long to get a plane? That's the question there.
4 months or 6 months, either way it's fine. I think if you say you can't get the cart before the horse, you can't buy an airplane. Say, okay, here I come. Where am I going to put it?
Yeah.
There's no storage out there, period.
Yeah.
So, $500,000 investment or $200,000 investment, learning how to fly, prominent businessman, whatever you're doing, you buy an airplane, where are you going to put it? So,
That was the discussion the airport
and
board had.
it takes it takes a minimum of 90 days from the day you find the airplane to whenever you get it. That's an inspection period and closing it and doing everything. So 4 months is cutting it tight, but if 4 months is what you want, that's fine with me.
The more rope you give them, the longer they're going to take. So I figure you just give them a set time and go from there.
I'm fine with 6 months.
The airport board discussed this, and they toured around for 3 months, and they're like, that's too short, 4 and 6. They decided on 6 because of what you just said, that it took some time I've never purchased an airplane. I don't know anything about buying an airplane.
It's worse than buying a house.
That's what I hear, and then you have to get it inspected, and it doesn't pass inspection, and there's other issues. But they decided on 6 months because it mirrored the lease agreements, which gives you 6 months in the hangar that you're renting to get another plane if you sell your plane.
I'm good with the 6 months. I think I agree with Clayton that 4 months might not be enough to it may be hard to locate a plane that's at the right price range. There's not that many around.
Okay.
Anyway, but I'm flexible on that, but I'd lean more towards 6 months.
Okay, I need a motion. And we'll add Mrs. Knox notation in there. We can add that in there.
You want to make the motion, Linda, with
Sure,
your note, with your change in it?
Sure. I'll make the motion to, oh my gosh, let me find it real quick. To approve the waiting list, the hangar waiting list application and hangar waiting list policy for Cox Field, as presented by Ms. Ellis with the enhancement of,
Okay.
who.
We can put a notation in there. I'll go
with the
back and listen to the
notation that we
tape.
discussed, yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, we got a second. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 14, discuss and act on an ordinance declaring unopposed candidates in City Council Districts 5 and 7 for the May 2nd, 2021 general election be elected to office, determining that no general election be held in Districts 5 and 7.
Okay. Linda Knox and Paula Portugal are unopposed for Districts 5 and 7 in the May 2021 election. So the deadline is passed for anyone to sign up. I ask that you approve an ordinance declaring both of them elected to office pursuant to Election Code 2.053.
Any questions? Okay, I make a motion that we approve the ordinance declaring the unopposed candidates, Linda Knox in Council District 5 and Paula Portugal in City Council District 7, elected to office.
Second.
All in favor? 2 more years, guys. Next is item number 15, discuss and act on a request from Samantha Hughes to waive her rent at the event center until May 2021 as related to COVID-19. I make a motion to remove this item from the table.
Second.
All in favor? Item is now in discussion.
Okay.
All right, who's going to present
Okay.
this?
In July of 2019, Ms. Hughes entered into a lease agreement with the city to rent the event center for $1,200 a month. She uses the building to prepare and package and serve food to children at the Boys and Girls Club and the youth at City Square. This past summer, Mrs. Hughes reported her state funding was reduced by the state due to COVID, and the club had to reduce their number of children. Mrs. Hughes missed some payments in the summer of 2020 and called Mr. Path to let him know she could not make the rent. Under the COVID circumstances, Mr. Path agreed to forgive her rent payments missed this summer. In December of 2020, Mrs. Hughes said she was still having trouble making the rent and asked if Mr. Path would consider waiving her rent. Mr. Path said he would need to take it before the council. He asked her to provide financial information. We got the financial information from Mrs. Hughes, and based on the information received from her, it appears that the expenditures far exceed her income. She does provide a needed benefit to the children and youth in our committee. We confirmed this with Katrina Mitchell, who's a unit director of the Boys and Girls Club, and Laura Woodruff from City Square. Mrs. Hughes is requesting a waiver of her monthly rent until May of 2021. She is here today to answer any questions you may have regarding her operations.
Okay, Ms. Hughes?
Hello, Samantha Hughes, address 627 5th Street Northeast. And any questions?
If you could tell us a little bit about how pre-COVID numbers and COVID numbers changed.
Yes, ma'am.
What numbers?
I feed the Boys and Girls Club, and when we were, before COVID, we had over 200 some children every day. Now since COVID, it went down to 115. Mm-hmm. I feed the City Square, where we used to have 35 to 40 children every day, Monday through Friday. When I say every day, Monday through Friday. And then we went down to 15. Yeah.
And just to add to that, I'm on the Boys and Girls Club board, and I work for City Square. We, at one while, the Boys and Girls Club was busting out of the seams with kids. You know, it was almost like you were going over capacity. You know, you had so many kids. Then we had to make the decision to, limit how many kids we could even accept because of COVID. And at City Square, we had our teen center started. Things were booming, a lot of kids showing up. Then all of a sudden, because of COVID, we had to actually shut down. So she didn't even have the opportunity to feed us, but the rent, employees, things like that was still going on. So she had all of this going with basically no income, or a very minute percentage of the income that she was bringing in. So COVID hit really hard. And just, if I can go a little further, just to say, in dealing with both of these organizations, I don't want to go too far into it in the detail, but I'm just going to tell you that what she provides goes a long way. You have certain parts of the community that don't get represented in meetings like this. And you have, I think Clayton said something about added service to the community earlier. We do things like building hangars that the kids that she served, or the people that she served, they don't have anything to do with that. And I think Councilman Stone made that a point, Councilwoman Stone, I'm sorry, made that point that it doesn't matter how much money you have. We're here to represent the whole city. And, with businesses and stuff, we give abatements, we give tax breaks, we do all of these things. And to help Ms. Hughes, it's really a small amount compared to some of the things that we do give out. And it's helping people that normally don't get represented. Or, the city as a whole, we do things for everyone, but there's specific things that in this city we do for people that some of these kids that we deal with don't get to take advantage of it. So to me, I don't even think this motion here is enough. This motion is not enough. So if it's all right with the mayor, when we do make this motion, I want to make the motion because I don't think this is enough.
Oh, I think it's an excellent program. I spoke with Mr. Russell Jackson, who's chairman of the executive board, and he says it's very satisfactory in what you provide. I think we just had some questions about if your numbers go down, your overhead should go down other than the rent, but it appears that most of the employees have been retained, even though numbers have gone down. And so to look at possibly cutting some expenses.
Oh, yes, ma'am. That's what I've been doing.
Yeah, and to add to that, City Square numbers went down, but we didn't cut down on our employees. Campbell Soup, some of the things went down, but we didn't cut down on employees. Actually, we hired more, we had to. So you have to, if you have loyal employees, you have to keep them, you have to retain them. And I know the government has helped with things like that, but with small business, you know, how much help did the government give? So, but I know some of her employees, and when you have people that'll show up, and, you know, especially when you have jobs that you don't have the $20 hour jobs. Yeah, people will show up for that. But when you have the lower paying wage jobs, you have to, if you can get good employees to stay for that type of money, you have to keep them. You just can't say, well, I'll get rid of them and get more. So I really don't agree with your comment there.
Ma'am, so I guess we can round off and say that about 300 children were being fed? Before the COVID hit, you were feeding about 300 children?
Yes, ma'am. I have
200.
She's a director.
Wait, and that was in these months of the financials you sent us? September, October, November, December, there was 300?
In 2019, up until before COVID hit. And we
Right.
had
Okay, so you were feeding about approximately around, 250 to 300 students, approximately. And then after COVID hit, it dropped down to 90. And from what I understand, you're feeding children that wouldn't eat otherwise.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what happened to the approximately 200 children that were they getting food?
Not necessarily wouldn't eat otherwise. I deal with these same kids, so that's not necessarily true.
Oh, okay, that's how I understood it. Not from you and not from anybody
No, I'm talking about the
tonight,
kids that
but-
she's talking about.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, I understood that they were students,
And Katrina
children
can tell
that
you
were
more
real.
about
probably can
other
help out with
feeding
that.
plans. There's other ways.
I'm Katrina Mitchell. I'm the unit director at the Boys and Girls Club. We started out, and let me give you a little history of why we sought her out. Our food, when I first started working at the Boys and Girls Club, was coming from Dallas, and I'm sorry, my broncho system is all messed up. Food was coming from Dallas every 3 days. That was the closest place, and it was frozen. I don't know how many of you have been to the Boys and Girls Club, but there's no way to heat that food. So the kids were getting a frozen chicken sandwich and a frozen milk, and it wouldn't work for me. It didn't sit well for me. So I sought out businesses in this area that could do it. And Samantha said, that's an idea. I take it to Facebook. That's where I took it. She said, hey, I was thinking about doing that because I had started taking the class because there was a need there. Samantha has provided meals. She started coming into the building. And I'm sure it was less cost effective for her when she was coming into the building because she had her warming plates. She didn't have the expenses of driving her vehicle to and from delivering food. She didn't have the expenses of the bags. She didn't have the expenses of the forks that she has to give out, the plastic containers that the meals come in, the napkins. She didn't have all those because we were able to provide those right there in our facility. But now things have changed. We first started out with COVID of last year. Once we started back up, we said we're going to only take 60 kids because of the atmosphere of COVID. We had no idea how it was going to affect everyone. And we saw that parents couldn't go to work because there was no one to watch the kids, and we shut down to 60. So then we increased it to 80, and I think we're about 140 now, and we opened back up. Well, during that June to December time frame, Miss Hughes went from a 200 January, February, March of 2020, 3 months off from us, and then start back up at 60 kids where she was serving 200 kids a day previous to that. Now, and not to mention, as I mentioned before, the packaging costs for the things that she does now. What she provides to us, you can't put a cost on that. Most of our kids eat at 11 o'clock, and then the younger kids eat at 10:30 because they have so many schools bunched up in so many grades in one school. They eat at 10:30. When they come through that door, they expect something. There's a hot meal there for them. They may not get another meal until the next morning. I'm not telling you something I personally don't know. I know these things because I hear this from them. That they don't get another meal until they go the next day to the schoolhouse. So whatever it takes to keep her in business, you're doing a service for this area. You're doing a service for our children. It's not the kids' fault that the parents can't provide for them like they need to be provided for. And this isn't second-rate food that she's providing for the kids. She follows the guidelines. I don't know how many of you went to the store and looked at a package of wheat rolls. A package of wheat hot dog rolls costs $300. $3. Her guideline says she has to provide that. I go get the 69-cent package because that's what's going to feed my family. And I don't care if it's, healthy or not, but she can't do that. So she has costs associated with what she does because she's under the government's guidelines, she has to follow. I respect her for following that. I'll ask her, I'll say, hey, these kids are not eating these wheat rolls. Can you do something? She said, I have to follow the guidelines. So I said all that to say this. We're her biggest organization that keeps her where she is. Without her organization, we wouldn't be where we are. I don't know if you've dealt with 100 hungry kids in the afternoon, but when those bellies are growling, they growling. And having that sack there for them to pick up and get that food, and most of them run in, get that sack, they go sit down and eat. Then they'll go play, but they're ready to eat. And when they go out the door, if there's a sack left, they get that sack. Oh, my little sister's in the car. They grab two, and they head out the door. That's what she does. That's why we can't lose her. So whatever it takes, and I'm not running y'all show up here. I'm just a representative for someone that's in the community. We need to help her.
Ms. Hughes, I have a question just on finances. We were given some information about it, and I added up appears you get most of your money from the state. Is that correct? And I added that up from September through December, and it looks like you got $24,309 from the state. During the same time period, you list total expenses of $40,855, and I don't even understand how that works. If you only had $24,000 income, how did you manage $41,000 expenses?
My personal.
Are you saying?
I have to put in my money as well as with what they give me. If it's not enough, I have to put in my money.
I still don't understand it because it's $17,000 more expensive. So there were $24,000. Again, I may not have the whole picture here. I probably don't. But just looking at what I had, it looks like, you're running in such a deficit that you couldn't possibly continue this for very long. If again in the last quarter of last year you had expenses of $41,000 but you had income of $24,000, I don't see how that's viable long term.
Well, I guess on that I'm thinking you're missing something.
I gotta be. But
yeah. And all of those, that report that I had to send to y'all, that's the same report I have to send every month to the state. And then they calculate it, and then they send over.
And that's not even including the rent, because you weren't paying rent.
Yeah,
so
they calculate
the expenses
all
would
of it.
have been even more than the $41,000. It would have been more like $46,000 or $47,000.
Yeah, it must be something missing then.
Well, it must be. I don't know. I just that struck me as I didn't. It looked like if what I have is true, then you can't survive. That's what I'm saying. And so I don't think I have enough information here, quite honestly, but I don't know. So.
Well, can I just challenge the council right quick? We've had a recommendation. Well, like she said, she turns her information into the state. She pushed us at City Square about getting things right because she has information to turn in. We had to get our process right, and I know Katrina and them had to do the same thing because she turned stuff in. And where I want to challenge the council is we got recommendations from the Boys and Girls Club. We've got a recommendation from City Square because Laura's sitting out there, our director, and I'm here. We've got recommendation from Grayson Path, who, when we were trying to get the police chief approved, everybody said they went on Grayson's recommendation. So we have all these recommendations, but we're sitting up here questioning her more than we did with the police chief. I don't get that. And she's given Grayson all the information and I'm assuming they went through it. So I just don't understand it myself. And Katrina made a great point about what she's doing for the community. Kids that we all know, y'all, everybody up here might not know them, but we all know them. But it seems like we're doing more for a stranger than we're doing for people that we know, that lives in this community, that have lived in this community for a long time. So I just don't get that.
Could I make a suggestion that we convene into executive session under Texas Government Code Section 551.071 and consult with our attorney on what we can do with the contract for Ms. Hughes to make the contract workable for the city and Ms. Hughes?
Is that a motion?
Yes, I move.
I second that motion.
Okay.
All in favor of going into executive to discuss this with the attorney, raise your hand. Okay, so we don't want to go into executive. Okay, no, we will not go into executive.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor.
No, that's fine. Go
I'm
ahead.
under
like
the
to make a motion. Oh.
Here's the issue. We have to debate, and I know we're feeding kids, but we have to have a business plan that makes sense, no matter if we're talking about whoever in the community. And obviously our business plan's not working the way it's going right now. Do we have a business plan going forward in May when we're gonna push the rent till May? And I'm okay with that. Let's push it till May. And I don't care if you pay the rent from May back. Mm-hmm. But that building's got to be generating income. We can't just give it away.
Well, you just said the hangars that we built were not generating.
The hangars are federal money and state. We match it with state money. That's a Tex dot property.
But didn't we pay $40,000 on that?
We did.
Paying
And we're fixing to
$150
give,
rent a month.
We're fixing to give 1,200 times 12, and I'm okay with that. But if we're going to match apples to apples, that's a Tex dot deal. That's not a city of Paris deal. I understand I'm as compassionate for the Boys and Girls Club, City Square, Boy Scouts, several different youth organizations, which I'm a part of and happy to be a part of. But we got to take it down, and we got to think, okay, we got to make a business plan going forward, and I want you to be successful. Mm-hmm. And we're going to help you be successful. And if that's something that but in the financials, we've got $100 spent at, where was it? Olive Garden. Now, that didn't feed a kid.
Can I speak?
Absolutely.
When we go on, we have to still, even though COVID, I have to get training, right?
Right.
And then I have to take like 2 or 3 of my people that's with me. And in training, they don't feed us lunch or whatever. We have to but we can use our business account to feed me and my employees, yeah.
I would like to see something put together as a business plan, not tonight, not tomorrow, but in the next 90 days that says, this is how we're going to, whether it's private funding, whether we need to give a little money from the city to make it work or something like that, but we can't go off of numbers and continue to give like that because we're not doing that for everybody.
So Grayson or Janice or whoever was, before COVID hit, how was the rent being paid? Was it on time, or do you have any history on that?
Yes, I do. In fact, in 2020, and it appears up until July, all the payments were made in July of 2020. It's then that there started having trouble making the payments.
After the kids that was when the kids went out. So it sounds like she has a good plan because she's paying her rent and doing what she's supposed to do.
So if the kids are there, then they get payment from.
If they are at the Boys and Girls Club in City Square, we get paid for it. Like, for instance,
and we think by May, we're going to be back on the track of doing that. Like I said, I'm okay with forgiving the rent all the way back to where we went, forgiving it all the way till May. I'm okay with that.
Well, I think my motion, COVID is still here. COVID is still here. So if I'm allowed to make my motion, you can vote me down, but if I'm allowed to make my motion, and to what you said, we want to be able to help her and to sustain. And Grayson, well, it's in our packet here that she came to Grayson a couple of different times, you know, hey, things are still not here, things are still not here, I'm still. So to make that happen, then that's why I say that even the recommendation is not good enough. We need to make the motion good enough to help her make it through. When
do you want?
I'm, Grayson and I talked, he said May, so
Is that good with you?
I mean, if that's what he can give, yes. I mean.
Do you need July?
If you could give me.
Can I make the motion?
I want to know what, before we make a decision, I'd like to hear she's putting it on, she's making it happen. What does she need?
Well, when me and Grayson talked, he said he could probably help me to May. I was okay with that. Any help is good help. I mean, if July, we could get it to July, I'd be grateful for that as well, because it would help. We could see if we're going to get the open back up like we usually going to be, because I know he opened it back up in Texas, so we kind of waiting on numbers.
We go down to 80.
Okay, see, she did 80. She just said they're going down to 80 with Monday.
During the summer, we go down to 80.
Oh, during the summer she go down to 80 this summer. So, yeah.
I'll just say, with Ms. Hughes and I met, that was like December, so that was, I mentioned May at the time because we didn't know how far COVID would be at, so this is taking a few months for us to work this out here. So that's where the May came from. I just put like 6 months down the road, and that was December time period, so now we're in March, so that's where May came from originally, and so.
I think my biggest concern, Ms. Hughes, though, is the numbers have gone down, so you're serving fewer meals, but your employees didn't. And when you have to do some cost cutting in order to keep the program where you are, I think you're doing a good job. I just think that the salaries is one place where you can cut. Because are those part-time, or is this an 8-hour-a-day?
No, they're part-time, 5 to 6 hours a day. Yeah, part-time. I'm only the full-time employee because I do everything, so I'm the only that.
I'd like to make the motion that we forgive the rent. I don't know the address here. I can't see it. I don't have my glasses.
1875 Fitzhugh.
1875 Fitzhugh, that we forgive the rent that Ms. Samantha Hughes owed, that we forego the rent from now until May 2021, and also that we cut the rent in half from June of 2021 to December 2021, so she won't have to come back, and it would give her time to get the numbers back up and get things rolling again.
That'd be a $600 rent, right? It's $1,200 now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Rock and roll. Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor? Thank you, Ms. Hughes.
Thank you.
All right, item number 16, convene into executive session pursuant to section 551.087 of the Texas Government Code 1 to discuss or deliberate regarding commercial or financial information that the governmental body has received from a business prospect that the governmental body seeks to have locate, stay, or expand in or near the territory of the governmental body and with which the governmental body is conducting economic development negotiations, or two, to deliberate the offer of a financial or other incentive to a business prospect described by subdivision 1 as follows: First National Bank Building and associated properties. B, section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, consultation with attorney to receive legal advice from the city attorney about 1, pending or contemplated litigation, and or 2, on matters in which the duty of an attorney to her client under the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflict with this chapter regarding potential loan to Paris Economic Development Corporation. It is now, I'm the only one here. It's now 6:53. We're going into executive. I don't know what's listening. Stephanie? Okay, it is now, let's see, 7:08, we're out of executive. We had yet another discussion on the First National Bank building. No action was taken. And I will make a motion that we authorize the city attorney to work with the attorney for the PEDC in order to draw up a loan agreement between the city of Paris and the Paris Economic Development Corporation.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous. It is now item number 18. Any future events anyone wishes to bring up or discuss? If not, motion for adjournment.
I move.